This is part 7 of the Stihl 023 or MS230 rebuild. Last time we got the carburettor on and the top handle and the rear handle and all the assembly. One thing I need to point out, and we'll just zoom in. We did the rubber buffers last time. Now let me get a screwdriver. Just by this buffer here there's a hole there which is for carburettor adjustment on the low screw, and then there's a hole here which should have a screw in it, and it just further locks this red section down here to the black section. So I'll just pop that in. So that's that done. So continuing on this rebuild, we have the flywheel to fit. You come round the side here, it's probably better. Now the flywheel has got a set of magnets just here, and as they pass the coil they cause a spark, bottom line. Now the gap between these magnets and that coil should be quite small, so we'll just put this flywheel on. There is a keyway, there's a key inside the flywheel and there's a slot in the shaft, so fit it, turn it, and the key will lock in place. Okay, and then it's simply just fit the nut, and this needs to be tight, this nut, because you don't want the flywheel rocking about, because if it comes loose it will do several things. First of all, it will wear the inside of the flywheel. It will also wear the end of the crank, the taper, and it will cause problems with the ignition unit. So it needs to be tight. So we'll just get a socket. So I've just put some starter cord down the plug hole, brought the piston halfway up, put some starter cord down to lock the cylinder, and we'll just turn that over, and the starter cord is stopping the piston from going over. Now, none of this white knuckle brigade stuff here, okay, but it wants to be tight. So that's nice and tight. We'll just back the cylinder off and then pull the cord out. That's a recognised way of locking the cylinder. So that's tight. Then these two here need to be earthed out onto that screw there. So that screw that goes into the cylinder holds those two earthing wires on, and they go into this little slot here. If you want to check the gap between the ignition unit and the magnets, it's shown how to do that on several of the videos, but just to cover it briefly, get 2 bits of printer paper from your computer, 800 gram paper, slacken these screws off and push the ignition unit away a bit. Put the 2 thicknesses of paper in here, then turn the magnets round, and the magnets will pull the unit to the flywheel with the paper in between. Tighten these up. Now don't just tighten one up and then the other and the other. Tighten them all up steadily so it pulls the unit square. Then turn the flywheel and pull the paper out. That should set your gap. And you know, with some Huskies, with the older Huskies, where the ignition units are here, they get so gummed up and everything, especially if they've been stood for a while, they won't create a spark. So take the ignition unit out and clean it, and then if it's been in a damp shed for quite a long time, leave it in the house for 2 or 3 days. somewhere warm, and then put it back in with the 2 bits of paper, making sure that gap is quite close, because a lot of times the build up of muck between the ignition unit and the flywheel will actually push the ignition unit over time away from the flywheel, and so therefore the potential for the spark gets reduced. Anyway, that's enough of that. So on here now we just put the starter unit. So that's 3 of the screws in, and the last one has got this almost a basket type, bush type thing. And that bush fits in the chain brake handle there and supports the end, just like that. So we've got the starter in place. Right, one just thing here, it's bad form to stick the plug in the plug cap and try and earth it against the cylinder to test it and then pull the cord round. If you're going to test the plug, you need to actually use a proper earthing clip, because apparently a poor earth on a plug can cause faults or cause the ignition unit to pack up. So maybe that's happened a lot of times in the past. So what I've seen is the plug in there and then a big clip on the plug, on the outside of the plug, and then to the case. Not to the plastic case obviously, but to the cylinder or something like that. Anyway, enough of that. Turn round. Now we've got the clutch and the oil pump to put together. Earlier on, I think it was part 3, might have even been part 2, we went into quite some depth on how all this lot went together. So I'm not going to spend forever describing it because it's all there, but let's just pop through the procedure. So we have the worm gear goes in there, and if you remember, it pushes against the circlip that's on the crank and also engages with the oil pump, and you might just see the oil pump going round, but it goes round very slowly. Then we've got the worm guard or the pump guard. Then the clutch itself with its 3 springs. And again, in the 026 video there's quite a lot about clutch faults, but if your saw is running and the chain won't stop running even at tick over, and if when you put the chain brake on the saw stalls, then one of these clutch springs is broken. Next thing, the bearing. The bearing does 1,000 revs when the saw's ticking over, so don't leave it saw ticking over on the floor. So when the saw's ticking over, the clutch is spinning within the housing, and the clutch drum obviously is not spinning because the chain's not moving. So that bearing has to take all the stress. And then of course when it's when you're cutting, the whole lot is locked together solid, so the bearing is then not moving. So we've got a notch here for the oil pump drive. Just need to spin that. There you go. Poof. Did you hear that? Just dropped in. Then we want the cover and the circlip. And there's the circlip. The way to put the circlip on is to put it like that and then get the combi key over the top of it and push. And there we go. With the combi key over the top, the circlip can't go flirtling off. So that's the clutch drum and oil pump engaged. chain brake works. Not long now. So with the exhaust, the bolts have got a square head and they just sit in like that. And it's great. If you get a problem with the bolt, you just replace the bolt. And you've no threads in the casing to go wrong. So then the other one goes in there. And then the heat shield goes in place. Now, there's a low and a high bolt, so you've got to make sure you get this the right way round. So that goes like that. Then we have the exhaust gasket, and the more things you put on, the more stable this becomes. And then the exhaust goes on. The exhaust blowing away from the operator. There we go, and then we just do those two nuts up, which are quite small, and I would suggest putting copper slip on those, because if you use it for 2 or 3 years they can get really tight, and then either you mess the nut head up trying to undo it, or the bolt shears. So if you've got a saw that has been used for a long time and these look really quite crusty, if you've got the time, just soak these in diesel, just with a brush and some diesel, and just soak them once or twice over a period of a couple of days. Then you'll find that they'll come undone relatively easily. Right, that's the bar and chain on. The plug looks very good. Just give it a quick wipe over. Easier to take the air filter off to fit the plug. You don't want to watch me do that, so that'll do. And then there's the rear filter box to go on. That's the wrong one. Now some of them have got a curve there, and other ones are just straight. So choke on, pop that on, back up. We're ready to start.